Hi guys. Hi everyone. Welcome to another edition of the HCD UAE meetups. It's excellent to see faces in real life and not just see attendance on Zoom. So thank you so much for coming out. My name is Greta. I'm help out Jonathan to organize these kinds of things and just try to make sure it runs smoothly. I'm just going to do a quick intro of HCD and what we do, and then I'll hand over to Atoli, Lean. Okay, cool. So this session is being recorded. There are people, we have attendance on Zoom as well. So if you, hi guys. So yeah, if you miss anything or if you want to review yeah, so if you want to go check it out or share it with people, you can always find it on the Human-Centered Design United Arab Emirates YouTube channel. Is that the full name? This is the team. Jonathan, you all know, organized it from the beginning. We have Katral, who is also helping out more on social, right? And then there's me. I need a new photo. And then we also have Asad, who also helps out on social. Please tag us in social media if you guys, any snippets, any quotes, anything interesting, share pictures, share wisdom, and help us get the conversation going online. And then we're trying out a new way to submit questions. So this is the first time that we'll be using Slido. You guys can actually log in right now from your mobiles. You can just go to slido.com or take a picture of this QR code. And the event code is Hello HCD. Move. Y'all done? When you're logged in, just a request. It's always nicer to not do this anonymously. So in the top right-hand corner, there's a little icon. Click on that, add your name so we know who asks the question. And then the questions, I don't know, either during the conversation, Jonathan can just flip over to the Slido tab, or we can take them afterwards. Yeah, probably. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I hope if it's your first time, I hope you come back. If it's not your first time, welcome back. And yeah, you guys better make it good.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Lean. I'm the Creative Hub lead here at Atelier. We're really excited to have HCD back here. It's becoming a nice regular routine that we have once a month. So before we hear from these wonderful gentlemen, I'd love to give you a little bit of a background about what Atelier is and what this space is that you're sitting in right now. So we are a community-powered organization. We are a creative services organization. So we are a combination between a design consultancy, a community, which we call the Creative Hub, and an academy. And we have actually two hubs, Istanbul, this is the second one. In Dubai, we launched last March. And we the community side of things, which is also the part that runs some of these programs and some of these events, is a membership-based community. We welcome creatives, freelancers, entrepreneurs, creative problem solvers to come join us, work out of the space, but also collaborate with us on projects. So it's kind of like a collective. Members also get access to our events. Our community in Istanbul, as well as over here, they get access to opportunities with us and our partner studios. So we invite you to, if this is interesting to you, to speak to myself or to Dana in the back there, or Hadil or Dave or anyone from the team to find out more. Like I said, we put on a lot of events over here. A lot of them are co-produced or co-hosted with our members. So we like to approach our events in a very collaborative manner. So also, if you're not on our newsletter already, please feel free to subscribe. You'll get access to all the different public events like this one, like this amazing partnership that we have with HCD. And September is going to be a pretty busy month. So we hope to see you at future events as well. And our space, the space that you're in, was actually designed by our own team. We welcome members to come and join, but we also open it up to the public like today. And we really think about space as a flexible asset for you. So it's not about, coming in here and working every day of the month. You could have a full-time job and still be part of the community and still get access to this. And last, like I said, we'd like to connect our members and our network to awesome opportunities. And so because tonight is all about product design, we thought it would be a great way to welcome anybody who is looking for a cool freelance gig or a cool project or even a job to reach out to us. We're constantly looking for UX, UI products, all kinds of different backgrounds. So if that's interesting to you, please reach out to us as well. And we will match you to reach out to Aisha. She's the one looking for this profile. So yeah, and tag HCD tonight, tag us. We're at atelier.dxb on Instagram. You can also find out more about membership. And if you'd like to collaborate with us, feel free to send your CV or portfolio, or if you want to recommend a friend or someone else who might be interested in working on some cool projects, yeah, feel free to reach out and email your stuff. And I think that's it. Welcome. Oh, just some housekeeping. I ask that everybody keeps their masks on, please. The speakers can keep their masks off while they're speaking. The restrooms are just left and left. And there's popcorn in the back for the intermission if there is one, or afterwards. And feel free to stick around, and we usually hang out for a while after. So great. Welcome.
Can you hear me okay? Yes? A little bit of an echo. Okay, cool. Massive thank you, Lean, and the whole Atelier crew. We love working with you. Yes, thank you. That will be handy. And yeah, this is our third meetup, I think, here after the new back to normal. And it's going to be a little bit different tonight. We usually have speakers with beautiful slides and some great questions. And tonight's fireside chat. The topic tonight is the state of product and design. And we are ambitious because we're in Dubai, right? We're always ambitious and we like to do some good PR. And these guys do look after businesses that are across the Middle East and North Africa. So we're not here saying that this is, the exact state of product and design based on a lot of research, but there's a lot of experience between these guys, and I'm going to keep them honest. I've, I know it's always in meetups we hear the happy path and how everything's amazing and all of our organizations and everything fantastic, but I'm here to really push and probe them to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, the past, the current state, the future, where are we heading, what are some of their predictions, and I'm sure we'll have some great stories in between. So without further ado, I just want to introduce Ronnie and Yi-Wei. Ronnie spent a lot of his years winning national spelling bees. And his career has been spent making people's lives better. He's done a lot in coaching, mentorships, in startups, in many different markets. I had the pleasure of meeting him. He nearly brought me back to Dubai earlier than my wife would have liked. And we've had just a great relationship and a lot of good conversations around this exact topic. So how do you mature product? How do you mature design in organizations? He's now leading, it's not just Sierra Group, but Al Musafir, Tajawul, and I'm sure there's a lot of other, sub-entities there as well, and has been doing a lot of great work to mature product and design in the region. So welcome, Ronnie.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Yi-Wei is the man who brought me back to Dubai. He is the former VP of product and design at Property Finder. Before that, I'm just going to do my own intro and not read the slides. Before that, he spent time in Singapore in startup or scale up, and has worked as well in Microsoft in the US. He's currently the chief product officer at Talabat. And we've also together been to both Egypt and KSA and done some research and product and design work with teams there. So it'll be really interesting to hear also his view on where are we, and where we're going. So welcome, Yi-Wei. And I haven't introduced myself, but for those of you who haven't met me, and I do see a lot of new faces, I think it's because of these two guys. So thank you for coming. I'm the head of product design at Property Finder. And I've been a Property Finder for 2 years, but as Greta was alluding, I used to live in these parts and started the meetup back in 2013. So I also just want to share with, from a human-centered design and a product perspective, we might look at the negative of the region, but it's also, I think, one of the fastest growing regions. So where product design and product, by itself were in 2013, 2014, 2015 is a very different landscape to where we are today. So it'll be great to speak to the guys. So over to you, Ronnie. Do you want to just maybe in your own words, kind of, introduce yourself maybe a bit further to what I've said, and also, just your thoughts as an intro on the topic?
Sure. I was really hoping that I didn't have to go first, because this guy's way better at doing this than I am.
Before beauty.
Yeah, it's true. Thank you all for coming out. The fact that you guys made the time to come out shows that you guys are really, look there, I see familiar faces from people in my team as well. The fact that you want to come here and see me again after seeing me all day today is very, thank you. I love you for doing that. Give me a familiar face. So introducing myself, I think I'm the head of product at Sierra Group. And that means a lot of different things. And my path to product is also an interesting one, in that I didn't really study product. I think I stumbled into product, and I actually learned product when I actually left. My background is I did computer engineering. I started off my career as a QA analyst. So I started as a tester. I loved, and I'll be honest, the only reason why I was a QA engineer was because I couldn't find a job as a developer, because I started work right when the bubble burst back in 2003. And I had seniors in my class who were losing their jobs, right? And me, a new graduate trying to find a job, it was impossible for me to find a job. So I stumbled into a startup, a scaling startup, and I got a job as a QA engineer. And what was interesting is I didn't realize this, but only looking back do I realize I started doing product right from the beginning. Because as a QA engineer, but who knew how to code, when I used to test product and go back and give tickets to my engineers and tell them how to fix it, I would actually go and talk to everyone in the business to understand, well, how is this thing actually supposed to work? And then what I would do is I would actually go into the code and see what was broken in the code. And I would go to my engineers and say, here's how it needs to work, and here's what you need to change in your code. And my engineers loved me and hated me at the same time, because this is just the natural curiosity that I kind of had, is because it wasn't just good enough to do the job. I wanted to learn about what it was really about, right? I needed to understand the nitty gritty of every little thing inside there, because I just had that curiosity, right? And then I went on to move into consulting. So implementation consulting, where I would implement software from big ERP companies for clients. And that's really where I learned how to speak to clients and people and understand their needs and understand their complex problems, and learn that when they give you a requirement, it's not that just you go off and build what they ask you to build, but you ask them a bunch of questions to understand, well, what problem are you really trying to solve? And when you ask that about 5 or 10 times, you realize that what they're telling you to build is completely different than the problem that they're actually trying to solve. So that was, again, an interesting, again, I didn't know that I was learning product at the time. Then I moved on to building my own startups, right? So I went back to school, did an MBA, went into pure strategy consulting for a while, hated it because it was very long hours. And at the end of the day, my product was a 200-page PowerPoint deck and a bunch of analytical, like I did a lot of math, which I appreciate looking back. I learned how to tell stories, and I learned how to do a lot of analytics, but I couldn't build a single thing, because you were telling people how to run their business, but you didn't actually get your hands dirty. right? And you're helping people make decisions based on a whole set of assumptions that when you actually start doing what you're doing, you realize 95% of those assumptions are actually not true. And therefore I left consulting and I decided the best thing to do was actually go build my own startup, because I thought I knew how to do a business. And I started my first startup, and day one, actually, no, it wasn't day one. It was actually day 30. The day that I woke up and I realized I don't have an effing clue what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And I literally woke up in fear of failure, because I'd never really failed up to that point in time. And my first startup pretty much failed for all intents and purposes, because I spent 6 months building a product without once talking to a customer, right? And I thought I had this brilliant vision and this idea, convinced 3 people to quit their jobs, raised $500,000 to do it, but didn't talk to a single customer and really didn't solve a single problem. So when I started selling this product, no one wanted to buy it. I got really lucky because I learned in that experience that actually, no, I need to go out and solve their problems. And we got acquired by a competitor because of the technology that we built. And then with what we made from the first sale, we built another 2 startups, which were also acquired. After doing that, I had my son. And after my son was born, I decided to take a year off and just be a dad, which was another product management experience together with my wife, who is the designer in this situation and also the budget holder in this situation. But that taught me a lot about how to build. I think that was actually my first leadership experience, because when you're raising a child who, really takes a lot out of you, you learn how to be kind and empathetic and loving. And oftentimes when I look at my team today, I actually see them like my kids, right? I'm not that old, but I really see them as being people I want to take care of and nurture and watch them grow, right? And that's the shift between, I think, being great at product and being a product leader. So today I stumbled into a place which is a travel and tourism company, and I've been building out their product and technology team for the last 5 years. We started off as probably about 3 product managers and 3 designers. Today, we're an entire team of about 45 people, split between product management and product design. And we work very closely as integrated teams with our technology team. And so when we get there, I'll tell you more details, but that's kind of been my journey into product. And maybe I'll hand it over to Yi-Wei now.
Awesome. Great intro. Yi-Wei.
Thanks, Ronnie. I think the researchers in the room should try and pull out some of the common themes in the story, because I feel like we're going to say some very interesting parallels. For those who don't know, Ronnie and I actually graduated from the same school, right? Well, not really. I'm fake Canadian, but we both graduated and went to school in Toronto. And maybe a bit of my story. So I grew up in Asia, a good chunk of it, a good chunk of my life I spent there. I grew up in Malaysia, then moved over to Hong Kong for middle school, Beijing for high school, did my undergrad in Canada, in Toronto, then moved over to Vancouver and Seattle for work. And then most recently Singapore before I came over to Dubai 3 years ago with my wife. A bit of a story. So I did my undergrad and in user-centered design. So I did a bachelor's in industrial engineering focused on user-centered design. So when John and I were discussing the HCD community, it really hit very close to home, right? So I spent 4 years, learning a lot about human factors engineering, really thinking about, how is it that we can design, planes better, cockpits better, manufacturing plants better. So I spent a lot of time in the design sphere. And my first ever job graduating out of university was as a UX researcher. So, and I worked at IBM at the time, and I was doing UX research for IBM's database product called DB2. It was the most interesting design job I've ever had, because I didn't have to design anything visual. All of the tools that I designed were in the terminal. And I would design things like what happens if you're a database admin, your database backup would take 4 days, and you wanted to know how it's going, what's going wrong, how you can rectify the problem. So that was a very, very interesting experience, going to design the design world, the research world in a very big enterprise organization for a product that arguably didn't have a very sexy user interface, but very critical. So after doing my research job, there came a point where I said, okay, like I learned a lot. I believe in the importance and the power of putting the user at the heart of the problem that you're solving, really deep diving into, how they use your product, where they're stumbling, really understanding and empathizing and helping to build a shared understanding of what that is with the team and everyone who's building the product. But what I realized that as a researcher I struggled with was taking it over the finish line, right? I found that a lot of times this is before the days of design sprints and whatnot, mind you. My job ended up being, I would put together a report that said, here are my findings, and no one would ever read it. And that was the beginning and end of it. So after my research role, I decided that I really wanted to take everything that I learned in research, but move over to product management. And that worked out quite well because I could still do a lot of research work. I could still get really close and understand customer problems. But when I brought that to the PM world, I realized that, okay, now I can really do something about this. So my first product role was at Microsoft, where I built products for their developer tools. So for those who don't know, or those who are fortunate enough to build a product for software engineers, you realize that they're one of the most difficult customers you ever get to work with, most demanding customers you ever get to work with, and feel like they can build products better than you can. So it was quite the character building role. So I spent a couple of years at Microsoft building developer tools, then moved over to Singapore, where I worked at a company called TradeGecko, which is a small company at the time. I joined when they just had raised their Series A. I was there for 3 years, saw through a couple of rounds of funding, and let the product function. It was a B2B SaaS platform that eventually exited and sold to Intuit. And then after Singapore, I moved over to Dubai, where John and I crossed paths when I worked at Property Finder, and now most recently at Talabat. So maybe taking a step back, moving around to all these different cities and all these different roles, like what are some things that held constant that are really near to and dear to my heart? One is to shift the landscape of the tech industry from being obsessed over just a technology or obsessed over fundraising and just chasing the next milestone and getting more money, to really bringing it back to what problem are we solving for people. And I'm on a mission a little bit to prove in the MENA region that this concept of product-led growth or product-led organization, happy to elaborate a little bit more what that means, is the future. That I want to prove that by putting customers and the product at the heart of everything that you do, that's what brings long-term success to a tech company, whether it's Al Jawal or Talabat. I think that there are very few people in the MENA region that are championing this thinking. And I think that, the fact that many of you are here who are champions and passionate about the design topic and the product topic, I think there's a big responsibility for those of us in the space to carry the torch and really build that up. And I think the way to do that, so the second thing I'm passionate about is people. I believe that the MENA region is in early days when it comes to product and design and tech in general. But what I think is very powerful is that in the MENA region, you have the audacity, the bravery, the ability to think big. I think Dubai, as Jonathan was saying, we're known for that, and we're a bit crazy, and we should be a bit crazy. And I think with that in mind, it's a good challenge and it's an exciting challenge. And the next thing that we have to do is to make sure that we're committed long-term to build the foundations of product and design and tech in the market, building the next generation of leaders, the next generation of designers, to introduce the concepts of product and design to people who may not be familiar with that, and really nurture that in the ecosystem. We started our first associate program for product not too long ago. We hired our first associate PM who transitioned over from a different role. I think it's things like that that really start to make sense. If that may not make sense for your P&L and your business right here in the next quarter, but makes sense when you think about things 3, 5, 10 years down the line. So that's what we're committed to doing. That's what keeps me, not up at night, but gets me up in the morning, thinking about, what is this that we're building. Obviously, building the product and the business is the core. That's what I wake up and I do. But the way we do it, putting the product at the heart of the customer, at the heart of it, building the team and the landscape and the ecosystem that supports it, that's what drives me. And I think we all here have an opportunity to really push that agenda over the next couple of years.
Wow, great intros. I think we could just end it there. That was enough motivation for all of us. No, but I just want to kind of start with, you both worked in North America. And when we say the state of product and design, like one, what comes to mind? What does that mean to you? How do you evaluate that criteria? And also, even though it might have been, a few years ago, you've worked in, different industries, different regions. How would you compare those regions, not just North America, Asia, as well, or anywhere else you might have worked, to this one? And what would you say are the biggest differences? I know that's a lot of questions, but Ronnie, do you want to go first? Do you want Yi-Wei to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so thinking about the topic of where is product design in the MENA region. So I was actually thinking about this, and first of all, I have to caveat everything that I say with, in the MENA region, the only real exposure or experience that I have is within my own organization, right? Like I didn't work at any other company before I moved here, so I can't really draw a comparison for you to say what's the state of. I know, for example, a few people like Yi-Wei and some of the great work that he's doing, some of the great work that Talabat is doing. There's other, let's say, bigger companies like the Kareems of the region that you've heard of, that let's say they've had this big exit when they got acquired by Uber. But my sort of take on this is that, or I should say, so what is my exposure? My exposure is I interview a lot of people, right? So I get to meet a lot of people who've been in product roles or design roles from companies from all over the world, not just from MENA, because we hire from Asia, we hire from North America, everywhere. And I have an interesting take on this, which is product nowhere else in the world is, generally speaking, any better than product here. I think there's this, and this again is just my opinion, I might be completely wrong. You think that companies like Google or Facebook or any of these big names are fundamentally better at doing product than every other company is. But I've interviewed many people from these companies and they're not, right? But these companies, like we compare sort of the insides of your organizations to the outsides of other organizations. And you think because of the big stories that you hear that they must be getting it right? But to give an example, and Yi-Wei kind of touched on this, over the last few years, we significantly invested within our organization, because when I took over my role as VP of product, or I wasn't even VP of product, I actually started as a product lead within our organization. And the way that we developed product was really a bunch of stakeholders coming to you and telling you what they wanted. And the product manager was really playing more of a role of a project manager. And the designer was really more of a wireframer who took requirements from your project manager, product manager, and then they went to a bunch of engineers and said, here, go and build this, right? There was this kind of handoff process. Stakeholder comes and yells at you and says, this is, because apparently they know what they're doing. Everybody else sort of takes those instructions and goes and builds it. I think that works, and I think part of the conversation should also be how product is run, let's say at a startup, versus how product is run successfully at something that's a scaling or a larger organization, because they are a little bit different. In a startup, you do need a founder or a leader who's pretty visionary and pretty hands-on and has a pretty clear idea of where they want to go and what problem they're trying to solve, right? But as I joined my organization, when in our first year, we had gone from $0 to $100 million in net revenue in our first year. So this was like a massive growth. Why? Because we had one simple principle. Our founders basically said, hey, there's no real travel company that does OTA, like online booking here in the region. Let's go copy booking.com, do it in Arabic, and build a brand that local people love, and pumped money into it. And I might get fired for saying this, but it succeeded, right? Is that good product? No, but did it work? Yes, it did, right? Now, someone from the outside looking in must have looked at the company at the time and said, wow, they must be doing something right. But I can tell you, when you look at the inner engine, it's not, it's chaos, right? When I joined them, I kind of recognized that, okay, what we're doing right now is not going to scale. Why is it not going to scale? Because at some point in time, those smart founders are going to run out of ideas, right? They don't know, none of us have a crystal ball. I tell my team this all the time, guys, I'm not some visionary crystal ball person where I know what we need to do next. What we knew from that point was we had to build an ecosystem and an infrastructure where the team members are the ones coming and telling us what we need to do, right? Fundamentally, we as leaders should be setting objectives for our teams, a strategy for our teams, and then empowering them with training, with education, with the right resources, the right tools, the right team structure for them to be able to come back with evidence and say, given your objective, this is what our experiments, this is what our data, this is what our research, this is where it's directing us to go. right? But that's not going to happen overnight. This was, for us, a 5-year journey, and we're still learning. And what is the crux of that? Me as an individual, I started not knowing any of this, but from day one, I studied. I study a lot. I read a lot, and I look at all the stuff that other people are doing, and I say, this seems like it's working for other people, but I will experiment with our team. And we've, like, thinking about building product as an experimental process, building a product team is an experimental process. To this day, I will say we do not have a formula that we know works because it's ever changing and ever evolving. Me as a product leader, I'm constantly experimenting with my team, right? Which is, hey, what's the next thing that we can try that's going to make sense? You know, I remember the first time we started doing customer research, right? Which was unheard of in our organization, doing the research and getting buy-in for it. And I have another principle, which is just go do it without asking for permission. Like, if you're waiting for your leaders to give you permission for stuff, you're not going to go anywhere. Go do it, fail at it, bring back the results, use the results to convince people of things, right? Everything we've done in terms of incorporating research, in terms of doing A/B testing or multivariate testing, in terms of acquiring tools that enabled us to do all of this stuff faster, all of that was a learning and experimentation process. I think it was 2 years ago that we met at Marty Kagan. If any of you guys know Marty Kagan, who wrote the book Inspired, one of the, I think, biggest product evangelists in the world, you know, when I took my team out to his talk here in Dubai, that sparked sort of a new idea, not just for me, but for my team. And they sort of looked at me and said, oh, now we know where you're getting all your dumb ideas from, right? It's like there was another guy who had a better name than I did who wrote a book, and they said, oh, you've been talking about this for a while, but now this really important guy is talking about it, so we're going to buy into it.
You're revealing my secrets, man.
Right? So, you know, again, to this thing about comparing our region to another region, I think if you have a learning mindset and you build a learning organization and you create that sense of safety for the people that you're working with, here in the MENA, we are going to be just as good, if not better, than anywhere else. The only thing I think is the difference is like if you take a place like Silicon Valley, when you're surrounded by other people who have that willingness to learn, or that this is what's normalized, you're willing to take risks because that's the environment that you're in. Here, that's the only thing that I think is missing and is now emerging, right? Is that willingness to take risk, that willingness to make mistakes, that willingness to learn, and even leadership communities within organizations that are willing to say, and you said product-led, give that trust in your people to come back and tell you, here's what we think we should do, right? So this is where if we were to invest our time, it's around creating that environment and showing examples where things have worked and sharing failures as much as success, because it's from the mistakes that you learn and you sort of adapt, and accepting the fact that there's no perfect process. I'll finish on this before I hand it over. We were just talking about this. There's no template for building product. There is no template. So if you guys go out and read methodologies, and I think this is a little bit of my fear today as people read these great books that people read and they think that this methodology is what's going to make me a great product manager or a great designer. It won't, right? Because the methodology is just a way of doing something. The underlying thing that's required is that tenacity, that curiosity, that willingness to go and figure things out that nobody else is willing to figure out, and going out and learning how to do it, and then experimenting on your own. That, I don't think anyone can really give you that, right? So don't get lost in the methodologies, because sometimes I think things get templatized and people think that's what happened to Agile.
That's why product is hard.
That's why it's hard, right? So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yi-Wei, just before, great answer. So we're just as good as everyone else, except for Silicon Valley, to summarize. The only...
No, I don't think that's actually the case.
Okay. No, but oversimplifying it. No, but one thing, Yi-Wei, I wanted to ask you is, first of all, do you agree with that? But before, not just that, also, it's not only this necessarily a state of product and design, right? I think if we take it to a next level, it's the maturity of the market, the maturity of our leaders, the maturity of the quality of product that's in people's hands, regardless what that is, B2B, B2C, is different here compared to other areas. So where are we at?
So I agree with actually a lot of what Ronnie says. So I'm not going to repeat too much. I'm going to add a couple of things onto it. One, the power of a market like APAC recently, with the likes of Grab and the number of companies in Southeast Asia that have had a big exit, I think adds one major element to it, which is the concept of osmosis, right? I think if you look at the most successful ecosystems, whether it's Silicon Valley or some of the more emerging ones around the world, you see a lot of movement with talent, right? You may have had a big exit and, 10 people move to this company, 5 people move to another. There's a lot of movement and momentum between companies. And what that does is that, as different companies, as Ronnie was saying, experiment, right? With different methodologies, with trying different things, building B2B and then building B2C, and trying a new business model, trying a new subscription model versus a one-time payment model. They try a bunch of different things, different ways of structuring teams, different ways of validating ideas. That gets shared across the different companies as that ecosystem develops. I think comparing where the state of MENA is compared to a lot of the other markets, I think that's the one part that still needs a bit of work. And you can't force it. You can't force it. That's a matter of time. And I think there's one more, one thing that I talk a lot about, which is there's a lot of things in product and design and just building a product organization as a whole, talking about the DNA of a product team that you can't fake. You can't templatize. You can't read from a book. It's a good starting point, but you have to evolve with it and learn with it and grow with it. And I think you need the ecosystem to support that, and it will take time, and that's completely okay. But Ronnie said something that is very true, which is, if you compare what the MENA region has and the people that we meet here and the people that we interview here compared to a lot of other parts of the world, I would argue that I think we're quite comparable. Why? I think, we read the same books, we get access to the same, a lot of times the same education. People who come here to the MENA region aren't necessarily here because they couldn't find a job anywhere else and they ended up in the MENA region. A lot of people are here by choice, and with that, with the environment we're in, a lot of people also see that the MENA region is an untapped region, a lot of ripe opportunity for us to build new products that can really change the way that consumers and businesses operate. I think, let's not undersell that. That's a massive opportunity. That's a massive upside for being in the MENA region. Now, let's turn the question around. What is it that we can uniquely offer that maybe other regions can't? What is it that we can build here that perhaps other regions can't? I think there's a part of it here that is about learning cycles, right? In a lot of bigger companies, let's say, even if you look at the likes of Facebook and Google, don't forget they're monsters, right? They're monsters of, 100,000 employees, 150,000 employees who are doing something. You may be the PM that owns like one button, and that's all that you own. I was speaking with one of the, someone who worked at eBay who said there was a team that just owned the add to cart button, right? And that's the reality of a big company. But when you come to the region like the MENA region, and we know that a lot of companies are still building their product and tech and design teams from the ground up, you end up owning big things, and you get to put in environments where, whether it's a travel industry or whether food delivery, where our growth in MENA arguably is faster growing than any other part of the world. Food delivery, as an example, or quick commerce as an example, is growing faster and is a more successful business in the MENA region compared to anywhere else in the world. And I think that's a massive opportunity. The learning cycles that our teams will be able to go through, the ability to test concepts here quicker than anywhere else in the world, the willingness of the market to go along with that as well, I think is really, I think it's something for us to test out, right? Fuel delivery, Carrefour is one that never had it anywhere else in the world, and I'm in Dubai and now I get my fuel delivered, right? There are new business models and ideas and apps and things like that I think can be tested uniquely in the MENA region compared to everywhere else. So yes, do we have some downsides in the MENA regions and that we need to work on? Absolutely. But I guess I would challenge the assumption and just say, okay, but what can we do about it that puts us in a unique position to run faster, to move faster, that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what we have here will be more mature and more interesting for people than perhaps some of the other markets around.
Oh, right. Slightly different topic. We haven't separated the two. I know it could be a little bit contentious. I don't know how many designers versus product managers we have in the crowd, but let's separate the two for a second. Product design and product management. And not necessarily comparing the region to the world, but in your organizations where we are today, do you see that as what makes sense in terms of design reporting to product? You're both more senior than the most senior design person in your organization. And what are the pros and cons of that model? Do you see other models? Does it depend on your industry or your business? What are your thoughts on that? Yi-Wei, do you want to go first? Maybe
yeah, I can. I'll start by saying, I think the concept of leadership and structure evolves with time, right? And to challenge that thinking a little bit more, there are also organizations that don't have, for example, a CPO role, they have a CPTO role, right? Like that, there are organizations that even combine product and tech to form something completely different. There are organizations that have a chief experience officer. There are organizations that have a chief design officer. I think all of this is to be tested with time. I think where the danger lies is when the rationale for bringing product management and design together is so that product management can tell designers what to do. I think that is the inherent danger of that structure. Now, I think it's completely different though, if the role of the product organization as a whole, if you think about it, is to be obsessed with the customers and build and understand like what true customer problems are and solve for that. I think that is both the combined role of product design and product management. So by default, they are very, very strongly coupled together. What I would like to see more of is CPOs in the market, in the industry that don't come from a product management background. Like it doesn't have to be, right? If we look at the role of the CPO and what they do, I mean, a good chunk of it can come from a very, very strong design leader. And I think that as design evolves over time, you know, and we've seen a lot of evolution over the last 10 or 15 years, right? Where design was just about the, you know, visually, you know, making something look good, to just doing some wireframes as Ronnie was discussing, you know, to now design is in many organizations leading the conversation when it comes to how we solve a problem, right? Sometimes overly so, where, you know, design today, you know, in many organizations is shifting to become the design thinking champions, right? They do the design sprints. They bring sales and marketing and customers and your commercial functions together to say, hey, we're going to solve the problem of X. How do we do it, right? And I think when design plays that role, well, they end up actually being the key drivers of a strategy, key drivers of where not just the product should look like, but how the end-to-end experience looks like. From the app to the service that you get, you incorporate designs, you incorporate elements of service design into that. You know, Greta has taught me a lot about the of UX writing and how it really is at the heart of building trust with customers. Like there's so many components of it that design now drives that I would love to see more design-led organizations come about, and through that, more product leadership leaders that come from a design path. So I don't think it's unique to product management.
Nice. Ronnie?
So I guess I'll answer this question by talking about an evolution that our team went through, right? There used to be a time where I think the product leaders or the product leads or the product managers on our teams were the fundamental ones who worked with the business, were driving strategy for each of the teams. And they were the ones who were quote unquote de facto telling everybody else what they needed to do. When we started the process of research within our organization, right, it was UX led or design led. And suddenly what you saw was you had another group of people that had critical decision-making knowledge that gave them a seat at the table, right? Is that suddenly you have these product people who are doing analytics and numbers and they have evidence that they're bringing that is powerful for making decisions and making better bets in your business. And then suddenly you had, you know, it was our last head of design who helped us build our research function. And when he built that research function, and the way that we also structured it was that it wasn't just designers or UX researchers who went off and did research and then came back and presented insights to the team. We made it a point that our entire product team, which started with the product manager and the designer and the researcher, were all going out and talking to customers together, right? So because of the fact that they were participating in that process together, they both of those now product managers and product designers and researchers came with very strong decision-making evidence. And what's amazing is when you're sitting with stakeholders and these founders that I told you about who think that they know what needs to be done, the only thing that's ever going to convince them differently is when you show them recordings of customer stories. So this was a tool that we used where we had in the room when we would sit down with our stakeholders and say, here's what we should go and solve next. We didn't talk about the solution. We spent a lot of time presenting the problems from the customer's perspective. Now, as soon as our product designers, and for us, product design is both our teams actually do the research. It's not a function. We do have a lead UX researcher, but within our org, the product teams are responsible for their own research, meaning that we've gotten to a place now where our product teams, and when I say product teams, I'm not just talking about the product manager and the designer, I'm talking about the engineers as well, right? The product lead or product managers, the designers, and our engineers are sitting in customer interviews where they're interviewing 2 to 3 customers a week, right? Now, they come from a different perspective, right? Your product manager, and this goes back to 4 key risks that we talk about, that is the job of every product team. They're trying to define what value we're trying to create for the customer, which is the problem we're trying to solve. The old school mindset used to be that the designer is the one that's trying to figure out how best to design it, the usability of that solution. Then there's the feasibility, which is how do we build this in a scalable way, which was always sort of the role of technology. And then there's viability, right? Which is, will it make money? Because solving a customer problem, building it scalably, building it in a beautiful way, if it's not going to be sustainable for your business, doesn't make sense to build. Now, the reason why product in the past has had, let's say, more of a voice in this situation is because they were always accountable for value and viability. And viability becomes a big one from the perspective of the business, because your business is the investor. They're the ones who are willing to put investment and money into what you're going to take bets on. The way that you shift that sense of who has a seat at the table is today, because our engineers, product managers, and our designers actually own all 4, they all get to drive decisions. What does that mean, though? That means as a designer, by the way, can I ask a question? How many designers are in the room?
Yeah, good question.
Okay, so lots of designers. How many product managers? Okay, we've got, oh, actually, I thought it would be more designers, but I see it. Any engineers in the room? Oh, there we go. Okay, wait. Okay, excellent. We have 1 engineer. We need more engineers in here. I'm telling you, this is part of the thing, right?
Part of the problem.
It's part of it. We need people who are interested in the other discipline.
I do invite
Right?
them. It's not because they don't get the
I hope that our head of tech, like my VP of technology, is actually watching, because he said he was going to watch. But
they're all online. That's it.
The cool thing is when all 3 of them, these roles become responsible for the decision making, and suddenly they're all accountable for it, you suddenly start seeing each person get interested in the other person's discipline, right? Which is, a designer is not just, hey, can I make this usable for my user? But is it actually going to solve a problem in a way that's going to make money? So one of our teams, we're launching a new product in about a month or so. Our designer or our design lead on the team is spending time with operations, is spending time with understanding the math behind the business. He helped build the business model for that business together with our product lead. Our engineers, because they're sitting in those customer interviews, without giving them a single artifact to go and build something, meaning we don't write a user story when we were in the prototyping phase, they went and prototyped a solution without a single user story, right? This is what happens when you get all of these 3 functions working together and answering those questions to make recommendations to the business. So this is, to me, how do you get an even keel? Is you got to give them the accountability, and all of them equally. If I just make the product manager accountable for the 2 of them, the other ones are going to care less, because they're going to say, that's your accountability, not mine. You make the whole team accountable, you get a completely different way of operating, right? And this is where I think, for me, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, one thing I appreciate is our head of design and our head of technology will be able to drive product without me. Why? Because it's the teams that drive it. And they're just as involved as me. And the same thing happens with their roles. Hopefully, if one of us isn't there, things will go on, because we're also involved in each other's work. So that's kind of my take on that.
So it's a very interesting one. I almost say sometimes that my CTO is a better stand-in for me than maybe any of my direct reports if I ever go on holiday, because that's how closely we work together on a lot of strategic topics. Yeah, makes sense.
Nice. So we're just gonna remind everyone, and we've got some questions from the crowd. If anyone who came after we showed this, if you want to just take a scan of that QR code, And I'm just going to invite Greta back up. Can we borrow a mic? Sorry. What do we need?
I'm reading questions.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Greta. Nice. This is interactive. What is your take on the UX maturity in the region in comparison to, let's say, Western companies? Maybe that's at a slightly lower level than what we've been talking about. I think we've been talking about a little bit about product as a whole. Any thoughts
Can
on
I
that
one more thought?
Sure.
I don't think it's a Western company versus non-Western company, but one thought about UX maturity in general. I think we still have a way to go to influence the business a little bit more. I think product management and tech actually in general over the last couple of years have evolved in MENA to have a seat at the table, as Ronnie said, in a different way. I think it's time that design also continues to drive more of that. And I think it goes both ways. Ronnie talked a lot about how we can, drive that decision making and bring a lot of those facts to the table. But on the other hand, when companies start to also appreciate a lot of that and start asking for that and start yearning for more of that, I think that becomes really, really powerful. Now, I think a lot of companies have a very strong appreciation for tech and what tech can bring to the table. Same with product management. Next up, I think design and design research continue to play more of a role there.
Nice. Ronnie, do you want to take the next one? Clearly, our resident UX writer is the best question. Do you think importing talent into the region to solve local problems is a good approach?
It's a tough one. I think it goes back to a little bit of what Yi-Wei said before. The only place in which I think importing talent to me makes sense is if that talent is going to bring something here that is then going to, by osmosis, improve the people around it, right? Otherwise, the best concept, and this is what because let me say another thing too. Importing talent, I have kind of an issue with it because people come here with this very arrogant attitude. This has just been my experience, which is, oh, I come from X company. I know how product is done. And to me, my experience has been, that's a lack of humility, right? And in fact, in these roles, like I said before, the most important thing is a willingness to admit you actually don't know shit and that you need to learn.
In life,
right?
In general.
In general, right? So I have, let me say
got
this.
you two together earlier. This is good. Take the shoulder up.
But that said, so again, it's something to watch out for when you are bringing someone. Is that are they bringing a humble attitude, and are they bringing one where they say, "I want to bring what I know, but I also know that there's something I don't know about this place and the people that I work with. Can I learn with them and adapt and actually build something brand new out of it?" So that's where, for me, importing, I think, has a value if we don't have the time and the space. Like, for example, there's not a lot of people in this region that have strong AI product expertise, right? Does it make sense for me to bring someone with that expertise from somewhere else? Because yes, it does, right? On the other hand, we have strong product and design people here as well. You can leverage them to build out that ecosystem, right? If something absolutely does not exist, and it's hard to invest in building that learning here, then yes, it makes sense. But otherwise,
can I ask a contrarian follow-up question? Like a lot of times in Dubai is a very new scene, right? And in markets and in industries that are not necessarily product and tech, you get a lot of people who feel the need to put up an appearance, to look good on paper, to look good on social media, to look good on how they present themselves, that this level of arrogance or this image that people are trying to portray often takes over. How do we fight that? How do we rectify that in the industry such that we bring it back to core substance and that we're okay with failing, that we celebrate that it's not just about how you look and everything's great and green and all good, but really we're all just trying to learn together. It's a question and answer together.
it's a good question. And I think my answer is that's your and my job, isn't it? It's like fundamentally, actually, this is another big part of we in our roles, Jonathan in his role, if we have a VP of technology or a head of technology, It's actually fundamentally our job to set an example, right? What I mean by that is if we as leaders walk around pretending like we know everything, that's what our teams are going to think, is that they need to know everything. But if we walk around with that attitude of, actually, I don't know the answer, but let's go figure it out together, right? Or when I make a mistake, and this was one of the things I remember when I started in my role, there was a lot of, if something goes wrong, blame it on product, because it's probably because you have a crap product. And I realized the best thing I can do is put my hand up and say, yeah, it's product's fault. That's fine. I have the maturity and I think I have the self-confidence enough to say, I can take the blame even for something that's not my fault, because then we can move past it, right? And let's go figure out what the answer is. When I make mistakes in my team, if we do a failed experiment, we recognize that that wasn't a failed experiment, it was a learning moment. The only failed experiment is something that we spent time on, we didn't learn a single thing from it, right? That was a waste of time and resources. But every situation, if we learn from it, and this includes me, then we set an example for everyone and they say, oh, actually, it's okay. We create a safe space for people to do that, right? That's where, when I remember when I tell people my story, I say, it looks much better on paper than let me tell you the reality of it. And when I tell people the reality of like all the failures, people get comfortable with, oh, okay, cool. And I usually ask this as an interview question.
I was going to say,
right?
how do you test for it in an interview?
So I test for it by asking them the question of, can you tell me one of the biggest mistakes you've ever made in life or in, and see, people think that that's a trick question. But what I do is I usually tell them my biggest mistake in life. And I tell them, yeah, I'll be honest with you guys right here. In my first startup, when I sort of built that, I got so obsessed with my startup, I nearly destroyed my marriage, right? I nearly destroyed every friendship and relationship I had. I should admit this, I turned into a full-blown alcoholic. And I had to go through a process of rebuilding my life, right? And it was a very dark place to be. And so when I ask people that question, I actually share that story with them to say, yeah, I was a huge F up in my life. And I had to learn from that. And suddenly it puts people, it's like, okay, this guy's
Can't be tougher than that one.
Exactly. It's like, okay, if I can do that and I can admit to that, then maybe it's a little bit easier for you to admit. And ultimately it comes down to just being human, right? Can I be vulnerable? Can I be human,
authentic,
right?
Authenticity. And it's one of those things that you get better at sensing very quickly in an interview. You know, when you're meeting people, when you're interviewing people, you know, what the true motivation of people are. And the more real, authentic learning mindset people that we can bring to the region, I think better off we'll all be.
Nice, great segue. I really like the next question. Just to take it to a little bit of a reframing, not changing the question, but talking about how might we help guide mature product design, product management, technology in general in the region. There is talent, but there's also, just like every other market, there's a need to nurture that talent. What are your advice, your thoughts on that? And apologies if I've totally munted the question there.
I'll try and answer in two ways. One, I think the responsibility for companies to invest not just in the right here and right now, but for the longer term, to build the ecosystem to do that, I think is very important. But let's not just look at the big companies like Talabat and Tajawal to do that. I think my challenge to everyone is in the industry is to see what you can do. I remember when I first moved to product management, when I first moved to design, the concept of mentorship was really important to me, right? I've met many product leaders and design leaders who I till today keep in touch with because they've influenced the way that I make decisions. They've influenced the way that I think about, you know, building product. And I think we all have that responsibility, right? If you're trying to build the ecosystem, bring people along, bring one or two people along and really coach and mentor and learn from each other. It doesn't have to be a senior-junior relationship. It could also be, hey, let's meet up and talk about what we're doing in different companies and share our learnings, right? I think there's so much of that we can do to build that learning mindset from people who are just breaking into the field.
Ronnie, thoughts, advice?
So actually, you know, it's a question I really haven't thought a lot about. Part of the reason is because I've been so focused internally to what I'm doing at my current place that I haven't really thought outside of where I work today. But now that you sort of bring up the question, what are some of the things that do come to mind? is even within our company today, the way that we work is we work very much on sort of that mentorship model, right? And something that I ask of all of our experienced members of the team is, don't just talk to your manager to get guidance. Go seek out other people within our organization who you see as having something that you look up to, and get them to spend time with you and mentor you, right? And in fact, this is something I also ask of my sort of more senior people in my team to do, is you need to make time to actually mentor people who don't report to you, because you need to be sharing what you know, because it's not just for them. What you realize about being both a mentor and a mentee is it helps the mentor just as much as it does the mentee, because it helps you clarify your own thinking, your own learning. And in the process, you're also giving someone support that they can't find sometimes, because when it's your direct manager, sometimes it's difficult because you kind of want to ask for guidance, but at the same time, you're like, but this person's also doing my performance evaluation. So, which by the way, everyone should always ignore and always ask for support and help, because if that manager is actually thinking about that in your performance, they're a bad manager. They should always give you a safe space to actually learn, no matter what it is. But what I do think of is, and this is something I'm going to take away and really think about, is I don't really know the answer to that, but I think it's how can I do, for example, what's inside my organization and start doing it outside? Because what I do realize is sometimes when we're in the middle of our own bubble, we don't sometimes know what we know. And we don't know that what we have done before, which we don't consider to be, let's say, that advanced anymore because we've been doing it for a while, that's still important for other people because other people may not have been exposed to it. So it's something for me to actually take back and think about and say, hey, is there a way in which I can make this available outside of our organization, because I know it's going to help people inside our organization too. As Sierra, as a company, we actually built it was an internship program where we ran it for 2 years, and it was targeted specifically towards Saudis and Arab expats. And it was specifically to bring up talent within the Arab region, right? And in fact, when I look at my team, some of my superstars are these young, talented people who came straight out of university, were really raw and really fresh, but had that raw drive. And you put them in an environment where they're given all these resources, they really flourished, right? So this is my takeaway, is how can I actually make that available outside my work? Broadly, I think there's also work to do with educational institutions, right? Because that's one thing in North America that I have to say, where I come from, there is a much better integration, I think, between industry and educational institutions. A lot of the startup accelerators that get run out of North America actually go, there's sort of standalone ones, but there's also ones that are run out of universities where they get the funding to actually connect with industry experts or people with experience, and they run, they send people through these programs so that they get that experience from others as well. I think that's an opportunity in this region, as which are the schools, which are the institutions, whereby taking, you were just saying that you were teaching a course earlier today. How do we do more of that, right? Is that how do we take experience and marry that experience with more institutional learning, right? Because I think the combination of the two of them can actually create a lot of value.
Nice. There was one question, I don't know if it's gone. No, it's still there. It was actually something I wanted to speak to you about, which was just the difference again of some of the founders you spoke about earlier, Ronnie, or the C-suite, and and Yi-Wei and I have spoken about this in the past as well, just around the expectation of speed, right? And one of the questions is asking about legacy banks, but I think it applies to all industries. And at least from my experience, I do agree with a lot of what you both said, but from my experience, I think that product mindset doesn't need to be a product manager, but it needs to exist within at least some of the element of that top C-suite. And just from what I've seen, and again, like yourself, Ronnie, it's limited to organizations I've worked in, there is an expectation that, and there's at least a thought that design or product, regardless of its maturity or whatever you're experimenting with, might slow you down. So my question is, do you agree, first of all, that maybe you see a little bit more of that here compared to other regions? And second of all, how do you get around that? Because you're often at the table with this level, and how do you prove the value of product and design? Anyway, it looks like
I'll take a stab. First of all, sometimes I agree. Sometimes I agree that we're a little slow. It's a little contrarian, and I'll say the following. I think in the effort of us being very excited about, ooh, there's dual track agile. Let's go out and talk to customers and validate things. I think there's also been a bit of an obsession over the last 5 years, and almost a feeling of liberation that when the business is not coming and telling us what to do anymore, we can talk to people and figure out what we want to do and decide the roadmap. That there is almost an obsession over the beauty of being able to do research and validation and speaking to customers, and almost analysis paralysis of being able to just learn and learn and learn and learn. And there was a post, I think, by Marty Kagan a while ago that I really resonated with, which is we have to remember that our job here is not to do research for research's sake, but do research to validate assumptions that go into building a product, right? And if that is true, that is something we need to guard against, because every time we do research for research's sake, we lose credibility as product and design practitioners, right? And I think that what we should instead do is flip it around. As you know, yesterday I was at Shara in Sharjah, really talking about MVPs and why we do it and the concept behind it. It's to find the quickest way possible, the cheapest way possible to validate an idea. It doesn't say that we do the full double diamond process and it will take 2 months for us to get to a single customer, decision of how we should build the product. Flip it around and say, okay, what is it that I can do tomorrow to learn and validate and move and learn and validate and move? If done well, dual track agile, doing discovery and delivery shouldn't be a multi-week process. You should be able to move as quickly as you can and immediately, in as few days as possible, show impact to the business. So I think that is a very powerful way of actually turning the conversation around to say, hey, we may not be delivering a full product, but we're consistently delivering insights. We're consistently delivering learnings. We're consistently testing things. We're consistently out there. I think there's an element of speed there that's very powerful. Number two, I think that a lot of times, when you're going through a lot of org transformation, I think of a Talabat from, let's say, 2 years ago, where we came in and we were still building the product and tech organization and figuring out how we sort of scale this team out. There was a lot, with new leadership coming in and things like that as well. There was a lot of there were high expectations of product and tech. And the last thing that we needed was a perception or reputation that anytime you give something to product and tech, it took forever. So we identified quick wins that were perhaps most frustrating for stakeholders, for the MDs, for customers, and we got them out the door, right? It may not have been the most impactful, but it won trust that we can execute. I find that sometimes as product and design practitioners, we are also a bit too philosophical and academic with our approach. And I think that's a danger of our love of books and reading and how it should be. And in some cases, obsession over how Airbnb's design blog says we should do it, right? And I think that there's an air of pragmatism and ability to execute that is the foundation that once you establish that, then allows you to win trust to build everything on top of that, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying take shortcuts every corner. What I'm saying is it's very important to build the trust with the organization that doing design, doing research is not a slow activity. It's not something that slows you down. In fact, if anything, it enables you to make quicker decisions that maybe you were umming and ahhing about and thinking about for weeks. Suddenly, design research comes in, finds great insights, within a week gives you clarity on the angle of attack and the approach that you should take. That, I think, is the complete opposite of slowing down.
Ronnie?
Yeah, we went through, I would say, a similar experience, and I think there's also speed is an interesting one, because I think every product organization actually starts out delivering outputs, right? They're measured on how much they're doing, and when you would sit down with stakeholders, and I remember there was a point in time where we had like bi-weekly meetings with our stakeholders, and all they wanted to see was, can we see your laundry list of things that you're building, and how many of those things did you check off the list, right? And we weren't checking off very many things on the list. So it goes back to actually something that Yi-Wei said. Actually, the first job as a product leader was actually to say no to the business, was to say, the reason why we're not delivering anything for you is because we're doing way too many things, right? First, we need to do focus. right? Which is, and we as product leaders or design leaders or tech leaders, our first job is to actually be gatekeepers to saying, no, we're not going to focus on doing these 100 things. We are going to commit to doing these things because we know we can deliver those. And then you do those things and you earn trust, just like Yi-Wei said. Once you earn that trust, what's interesting is the biggest shift that we made is we stopped showing our stakeholders what we delivered and we started showing them the impact of what we delivered. So, and we didn't ask them permission. One day we just showed up and we started showing them result numbers and we started showing them results of experiments. And what's really interesting is they instantly, it's like they were watching a different movie and they liked the movie better, right? Which is they stopped asking us about, did we deliver those things we committed to? They said, those are really interesting results. Those are really interesting numbers. Then we started showing them insights and decisions we made because of those insights. And we showed them the results of the things that we built based on those insights. Suddenly then everyone's got the story that they're connecting, right? It's, hey, you guys got some evidence. Your evidence helped you make a decision. Based on the decisions you made, these are the few things you built. This is the impact of those things. And now we've gotten to a place where our stakeholders want to see the story, right? They're not, in fact, the funny thing about Speed is now we don't do bi-weekly update meetings with our stakeholders, we do it quarterly, right? Every quarter we sit down and we show them, here's what we did last quarter, here's the results of what it is, here's the insights that we've derived, and here's the things we're committing to, not the delivery of solutions, here's the problems we're going to focus on solving for the next quarter. Because solving these problems, we believe, will have this kind of an impact on the business. And that's when your business looks at you and say, we're aligned with you. We're on the same page because you guys are trying to solve the right problems. So I'm a big believer in, it's not about how much you do, but if you show 3, 4, 5 things that you delivered that created impact, they actually stop asking you for speed. There are situations like when COVID happened, there's a lot of things we had to do really fast. I think you guys especially, right? There are times where you just, because this is the second point that I'll make, and I think you made a very good point. Sometimes we also stop taking accountability for our decisions because we get comfortable in research and we get comfortable in evidence. Sometimes you just got to go with the intuition that you've built up based on having done research in the past, having done analytics in the past. If you're spending time with customers on a weekly basis, if you're doing analytics on a regular basis, guess what? That knowledge is in here. It's inside you. What that means is you can make intuitive decisions that are probably going to be pretty right. So you have to also trust. So we ask our teams too. And there's this concept that I think it was Jeff Bezos and Amazon did, right? Like one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. They're big decisions. Like if we're going to launch a new product, yeah, we better be doing quite a bit of evidence-based research because that's heavy investment, big decision, one-way door. There's no coming back, right? If it's going to fail, it's going to be a big failure. We don't want to take a big risk on that because we're mitigating risk. If it's something small where fundamentally, do I need to go get a customer to confirm this and I need to be 100% sure to release this versus it's a 1 sprint or 2 sprint piece of work for me to do, go with your instinct, right?
That's a really good one, huh? Type 1 versus type 2 decisions, as Amazon calls it. I think it's one of the most underrated skills of product managers and designers, not just in the region, but in general. People who don't understand what, like, I think it's a very hard one to gauge as well because you require a deep understanding of the business and your customers to be able to make a decision on whether this is a reversible or no. But it's a very important one because that's how you determine where to spend the discovery dollars. For every $100 of discovery you have, are you going to spend 80 of it on stuff that you kind of already know and it feels really good to do it? Or are you going to spend 80 out of the $100 on things that you really don't know and the biggest risk of the project and you really want to get it done? And
Thinking
maybe
what's the name of that book? The Thinking in Bets book?
I think that's actually the book. Yeah, I've never read.
Oh, is that it?
It is a good one, Thinking in Bets.
It's
Written by a poker player who then became a business consultant.
It's a lady who won the world. Yeah, if every decision you made, you actually thought of, you put your own money in, then how much money would you put behind?
Yeah. Maybe one more thing that Ronnie said, which is the intuition piece. I think we should unpack that a bit. Because when we discuss this whole, you have a CEO or a founder who's like, you guys need to move faster. There's a piece of it that we can empathize with as well. Because imagine you're a CEO of a company and you've been working in X company for 10 years. You built this from scratch. You've spoken to 1,000 customers. You failed 500 times as you built this company and made mistakes over the last 10 years, which got you to where you are. You decide to hire a product and design team. and they say, cool, let me learn about your industry and do some discovery. Like, imagine how frustrating it is to be that founder to say, guys, I know this, like I've been in this for a very long time, right? And therein lies a challenge where in order to enable the team, they need to give trust and give a lot of, as I say, shared custody of the baby, which is the product. But I think at the same time, the product organization should also try and find different ways to harvest that institutional knowledge, that intuition, that sometimes people who've been in the company for a very long time or the business can bring to the table.
And what if that internal hypothesis is actually wrong? How do you then bring that knowledge back when you've got, again, going back to the similar question of the past, when you've got a lot of internal either subject matter domain expertise or just general experience, but it's misaligned with what you're hearing? So one of the questions, I mean, Ronnie kind of answered it already, but one of the questions was around, if you've got, how do you shift towards being design, and I'll add product-led as well, where business is convinced that they should set the agenda, and tech is convinced that they set the roadmap.
If you show that it works, if you show that it works better than their way, if you show that that's the best way to grow the business, that's it. That really is it, right? And I think that without sounding crazy, I mean, imagine you're you're working at a company. The company is called Toyota. Everyone knows Toyota. They make cars, right? What does the CEO talk about, and what does the salesman, the very questionable salesman at the showroom, talk about? They're talking to you about the new 2022 Camry, right? Most fuel efficient Camry ever. AirPlay 2.0, so you don't have to plug your phone in, it's on Bluetooth. Most comfortable seats in the industry, and has the safety rating that is better than every other car. Now, if you're a company like that, like Toyota, the CEO and the salesperson puts one thing at the heart of the company. What is it? The product which they manufacture, the product which they build, right? Which in this case is the car, right? Which is that Camry, and they obsess over that. They really rally the entire company over that. And I think that that's what it means to be product-led. If we bring that parallel over to our world in a digital software world. Now, why is it that if you manufacture a car, you can obsess, you need to obsess over that car, but when it comes to tech, you talk about your monthly active users, you look at a conversion rate, you look at this percentage of CSAT and whether it's going up or down, you try to obfuscate a lot of that behind metrics, and you obsess over growth numbers and perhaps not about that core experience. And that for me is what it actually means to be design-led. And it means to be product-led. I don't actually think it's about who leads it. Right? I think a lot of people, when I say, oh, I'm on a mission to build a product-led organization, they're like, ooh, you just want to be the boss. I actually think it's the complete opposite. I just want everyone to be obsessed over the car. I just want everyone to be obsessed over the thing which we're presenting to the world and our offering and what we have to solve problems that people actually have. And that's what I think it means to be design-led or product-led, is to put that at the heart of it. And I think what we need to prove is that it's not a power play. It's, hey guys, like, if this is what we present to the world, how do we rally ourselves behind the 1, 2, or 3 biggest problems that we as a company are facing because customers aren't happy about X or Y or Z, and how do we obsess over that? Whether you're a tech person or you're a strategy person or you're a commercial person or you're a product person, what's that thing? What's your Toyota Camry that you're going to obsess about, right? Not your acquisition numbers, not your conversion rate numbers, not the micro optimizations, but like what is your Toyota Camry that you're going to look at and say, that's my baby, that's my product, we're going to rally the company behind that. I think that's the culture shift that we need to make.
Ronnie, agree? Disagree?
Yeah, so
You guys got to stop agreeing. I want to see some
no, actually, it's
conflict.
funny because you and I had a brief, I think it was like a LinkedIn back and forth about this as well, where I think the term
What?
product-led.
Without me, come on.
Sorry, we'll add you to the group. So I think when we use terms like product-led or design-led or tech-led, there's already an inherent ego battle that has been created, right? Because people think of themselves based on this identity. I am a product manager, I'm a designer, I'm an engineer, right? But I think at the core, if we take all these words out, what are we really talking about? Or at least from my perspective, it's not even the product, it's the problem. It's being problem-led or problem-driven, right? And we're all humans. Even when we talk about a car being the center of the product, what is the car there for? The car isn't about its features. The car is about there's a person or a family that needs to get from A to B, has a particular need that they have to have met. And it's about connecting the right car to the right need. That's what I believe should be led by, right? And what does that mean to me? I actually define it as more two things. It's being critical thinking led, right? There's a way of thinking and there's a way of looking at things, whether it's analytical, whether it's design research, whether it's empathy towards human beings. All of these things are the things that contribute towards critical thinking. And that critical thinking is what helps you build evidence. The evidence is what then helps you make decisions to what you need to do, right? That goes to the problems we're solving and the way to solve those problems. But then there's a second aspect, which is accountability, right? Which is if you want to have that position where people are trusting you to make decisions, you have to be accountable for whatever that decision is going to be, which means if it works, actually, sorry, I should reframe this. If it works, you actually give everybody else the credit, right? You actually recognize it's a team effort, that there's no way that one individual person, one individual function, one individual team drove that impact or that outcome. Everybody needs to be given the credit for the part that they played in it. But if you want to have that decision-making trust, then when things go wrong, you have to put your hand up and be the single person to take the blame for it. That's when people trust you.
Glamorous job, isn't it?
It's very glamorous, but it's not actually as bad as you may think it is, right? Taking the blame for stuff is not that bad, believe me, because what's the worst they can do to you? They fire you. Big deal. Really, really. Honestly, we have this like fundamental belief that, oh my God, if I'm wrong, if I get caught out for this, or if I take the blame for this thing, that, oh my God, the world is over. It's really not, because guess what? This is the fun. Everybody is walking around pretending like they know what they're doing, including the senior leaders at companies. They're very confident. They're very, they have all this.
Making it up as we go, everything.
But everybody's making it up as they go, right? So please do not feel like comfortable taking the blame for stuff and saying, yeah, I made a bad call. This is what I learned from it. This is what we're going to do next. And people are cool with that, right? The only people who aren't cool with that is individuals who feel that need, that the only way I can prove myself is that perception thing where people are managing their perception, how people perceive them, more than allowing their work to speak for them, right? And that's, the way that I've kind of learned is be strong critical thinkers and take accountability. If you do that stuff, doesn't matter what role you come from, people will give you a seat at the table because they trust you, right? That's the most important thing, so.
Nice. Slightly different topic. I really love this question because it's a challenge for all three of our organizations, Property Finder, I'm sure Tajawal and Talabat as well, which is you've got a large region with very different countries, different, even within each of these countries, you've got, between cities, even if you compare our own country, Dubai to Abu Dhabi, having lived in both, having worked in both, very, very different market, different makeup of that market. And if we think about, Yi-Wei and Abdurrahman's in the room as well, and the three of us, we've been to, did the research in KSA, did the research in Egypt. How do you create a product for all? And he worked at Tajal as well.
All three out of three.
I
Look
know,
at you.
right? You got a special prize at the end of the night. How do you build a truly localized product? Like Facebook, Google, some of these organizations, some of our leaders say they don't change their product. They don't localize it, but they don't need to. If you are not necessarily, do you agree with that model of it should be the exact same product and you limit how much you localize, or how deep do you go with that localization?
As a good product person, we say the answer is always, it depends.
We haven't had that tonight yet, so yes.
And let me just explain a bit about Talabat's business model and how we sit in the relative terms of our larger parent organization, which is Delivery Hero, right? So Talabat is part of a much larger company called Delivery Hero. Delivery Hero is the largest quick commerce and food delivery player outside of China. Important to say outside of China because the scale of China is just absurd. Now, Delivery Hero's model is quite interesting because we have today 7 different entities across the globe, right? We have Talabat in the MENA region, we have Food Panda in APAC, we have Pedriosha in South America, we have eFood in Greece, we have Ewua in Korea. We do have actually different brands with very different consumer products across the board. We are very we use our resources very cleverly as well, in the sense that there are some things like our restaurant experiences, like our rider experiences that are built once and deployed everywhere, because at the end of the day, if you're a rider delivering food, for the 80-90% of what you go through, it's for the most part very similar. But what we realized was extremely important was for us to win local. For us to win local, to say that the customer in MENA is quite different from the customer in South America, very different from the customer in Europe, that we need to win local, which means the customer experience and the business model will have to adapt to what local needs are, right? But at the same time, we are in 9 markets today, and we don't have 9 different products. So in a sense, we've sort of summed the parts to say, whether you're a customer in Iraq, which is our newest market that we just entered into, or a market that's most mature in Kuwait, we're giving you the same experience. So we've made a deliberate trade-off to say, for economies of scale, we cannot ship 50 different products in 50 different countries that we operate in, but we will accept some level of localization, which is on a regional level, and move as quickly as we can to win the different regions with a different product, but not go any further than that.
Okay. Ronnie?
It depends. It really does. I mean,
yours is different, right? Because it's more focused on, I mean, that was a great global answer. And I do get, if you're looking at it at the top, I think, I mean, if you're looking at it from, say, a lowly researcher who sees massive differences in a market, totally get that we can't have, so many different products. But how do you, what is that middle ground? If you maybe, because you're just focused on MENA, is that correct?
So I think the word product also has to be, let's say, defined a little bit, because so your business, for example, isn't just a digital product business, right? Our business is not just a digital product business. There's logistics involved. There's third-party suppliers that you work with. There's, payment providers that you have to connect with,
that one's painful.
Right? So when you go to different markets, you have to think about, well, what's the right payment method for that market, right? What's the cash system, right? You have to understand, for example, we're in travel. There are certain markets that are more internationally driven, right? So for example, Dubai has no domestic flights. That'd be a very interesting flight that you would take if you flew from Sharjah to Abu Dhabi. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia, which is our biggest market, it is probably about 50% domestic, 50% international, right? Then you have markets like, for example, India, which is predominantly domestic, right? So if you look at the big travel players there, which are like Make My Trip or Goibibo, they're primarily driven by domestic bookings. So depending on, I think as an organization, you also make a strategic decision, right? Which are the markets that are right markets for you to go into? So for us as a business, we knew that we're a Saudi company. Therefore, our focus is going to be primarily in Saudi Arabia, and then adjacent markets that make sense where we can find economies of scope and economies of scale, right? Which is, what are the things that we're doing for the Saudi market that are easy enough for us to transition? So Kuwait is now another market for us. UAE is a market for us, but interestingly enough, UAE is actually a very different market from Saudi, because UAE, you have 80% expats. On the other hand, we built a product primarily for Saudis and Kuwaitis, which really doesn't apply here in the UAE. So we've had to do something different, right? So I think it really depends on what type of business you have, what type of product you're providing, and make sense of which markets to even go into. And it's not actually about solving problems in every market. You make a decision around where can you build a sustainable business, right? And that's where you kind of go. So
nice. I am conscious this time. We've got a couple more, maybe just one more, and then I'm just going to ask you, so I'm going to kind of give you some heads up before we get to just thinking about your predictions for the future in terms of
crypto and
sorry, crypto, blockchain, all that good stuff. I do like the operationalizing, not just design ops, but product ops, research ops, DevOps, whatever you know, ops tickles you fancy. How have you introduced that in your organization? What's that adoption been like? Not just the happy path. Ronnie likes to tell me that almost all the business of the squads are amazing. And then I challenged him when we spoke in the past. I said, okay, that's a happy path. Maybe that's few teams or 50%, but what are some of the learnings? And I've heard that as well about Talabat in terms of you have to be very strategic. You've got a lot of squads. You've got a limited number of whatever, maturity of talent. Where do you focus? How have you tackled this? Is it something you tackled at all? Have you not tackled it?
Are we talking about design? Are we talking about ops or?
Talking about ops, product ops, design ops, in terms of maturing the practice of operationalizing product, operationalizing design.
John and I had a debate, I think about 2.5 years ago, about whether we needed a design ops team. And I'm like, we don't need design ops. This is too theoretical. But I've come to realize that I was wrong. Learning mindset, growth mindset. No, we make mistakes. We at Talabat today have a design ops team that takes care of research ops and design ops all together. We also have a product ops team, and our product ops manager is actually joining next week. These are two areas that when I came into a company of our size, I actually completely very early on dismissed and said, we like, that's not an area we want to focus on. But I've come to appreciate is absolutely crucial as we are a 250-person organization across 9 markets with 4,000 employees in the market. I think one thing that we don't think about is scale enough. And I think that a lot of times being in the MENA region or having worked in maybe smaller companies, we don't appreciate the challenges that scale brings to the table. You know, when you are one product team and you're going to speak to users and you cold email 10 users and 5 of them reply and you set up meetings and that works for you, fantastic. But what happens when you have 30 squads trying to do that at the same time, accidentally reaching out to the same customers, not compensating customers in the same way, not organizing, you know, schedules and meetings in the same way? All of that becomes extremely complicated. And there are people who are really, really obsessed about building processes, who are really obsessed about making things scale. And I've learned to love a lot of these people because I realize I am not one of those people. And having those people on my team really brings out the best out of everyone on the team. If they can make everyone 10 or 15% more efficient, I think that pays for itself 10 times over. So to give a bit of insight into what design ops today owns, they own very, very critical parts of our design infrastructure, right? Our design system, our component library. They work with the engineering team on what we need to build to make that work at scale. They own our research pipeline. They figure out how we can make sure that we have the right representation across all the different markets, across different customer segments, and make that available to people like me. You know, where every week I try to speak to 1 to 3 customers, if I can, from different markets to learn about what their last Talabat order was like, right? They enable a lot of that, which was never available before. Product ops does a very similar thing, but but recognizing that we're not a business where we're just software, we launch it and people use it and happy days. But we launch something, and imagine you launch a feature, but you have no restaurants. Well, so what? Like there is a piece of it where you have to go to restaurants, onboard riders into your new functionality and how it works. And we're starting to divide and conquer a little bit where the product teams own the build, and there's a rollout team, the product ops team that takes it with the market to make sure that every product that we build, we optimize and we make sure that they're truly successful in the market. So it's very early in our journey in building product ops. Design ops has a bit of a head start. We're about 1.5 years in to design ops, but learning to appreciate that every day.
Nice. Ronnie?
I think I mean, we don't really use the term product ops or design ops, but I guess the way that I look at it is how do you institutionalize something that if the really strong people who do something within your organization move off to do other amazing things, will your organization fall apart, right? Or as you scale and new people are joining your organization, how do you maintain the quality of how you function, right? So that's really, and the analogy I kind of look at, if I was to think, it's like I think about like a Formula One race team, right? It's like there's the driver and there's the team that actually works on the car. And then there's the team that works on the stuff that the people who work on the car work on. Like, who are the ones who take care of the workshop, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about here, is that can we set up a structure that allows, whether the driver changes, whether your pit crew changes, that the system will still continue to function. We as an org, we're at that inflection point where we're starting to institutionalize this stuff. We haven't gotten it right yet. We're trying many different things to do that. We've prioritized it, but we're not there yet. So this is another one of those things we're experimenting with, that we're putting, I think, tools, practices, methodologies into place that will hopefully allow us to, but I'll let you know in a year or two where we're at.
So there isn't a person whose sole job description has design or product ops.
I'd say
It's more owned by, I mean, you've got a design system you've chatted to me about, for example,
Yeah.
but that's owned by
our head of design,
or the
right?
head of
Yeah, head of
design.
design. So I mean, yeah, no, we don't have these specific roles as of yet.
Okay.
We have people within our teams playing sort of dual roles, like I said. Like, for example, we have people who, if they're really strong at discovery, they coach other teams on discovery. So we create internal coaches, internal teachers. But it's also where we're at today is that I would prefer someone who is experienced at doing it, coaching somebody else in doing it. I don't want someone who doesn't have experience doing it, teaching someone about a concept or a methodology, right? Because then you've got people who are actually on the ground doing the work, getting theory. And in fact, this is another one of my pet peeves, is a lot of people come to me and ask me, hey, what certification should I get to become a product manager?
So bad.
Right? And like, what is
So
the three-letter designation I should get? I say, please don't, because being a Scrum Master, these little things that you get, they're not
Inherently bad, but they don't get you
No.
to learn how to build product.
They don't,
or be
right?
a
Like-
Or an
designer.
MBA.
or an MBA, those douchebags. Yeah, I know. Like me. It's,
You have one, don't you?
I do. which is why I had to unlearn a whole bunch of stuff when I got into product, because I thought I knew what I was doing, but I really didn't. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know the answer yet. Like, there's still a lot
Sure.
to be figured
So
out.
final question, and feel free to stay and, kind of network after. Your thoughts on the future, where we're heading, both as a region, it's a two-part question, as well as a function. Like some of I shared with you both an article, for example, that said product and design are merging into perhaps one. Do you see that happening? Do you not? What is both, in terms of the region and its maturity, as well as the craft of product and design? Ronnie, do you want to go first on this one?
I would say that I don't know if they'll quite merge, but I think, again, it's not thinking of these as separate functions, but more of that, because we use that concept of the trio, right? Which is there's product, design, and engineering, and you can have other functions within that trio as well. For example, you can have data, you can have customer service, because within certain situations, you need that expertise. But I don't see, for example, it's not the product leader or the product manager who drives the team. It's that trio that drives the team. And when all three of them or all of those functions are accountable across the board, you are going to see each of them contribute or challenge or question each of the other functions as well, right? So when more of that is happening, you're going to start seeing, like, for example, some of my best product managers are ex-engineers, right? Now what we're starting to see is I'm pretty sure I'll have a couple people who switch into product leadership roles who were product design leads because they're becoming very strong. I think, unfortunately, product managers are probably the only people who are not capable enough to go into either of those other roles, because all they can
I
do-
design a PowerPoint. My team gives me a lot of help. For it.
But designers and engineers, honestly, I think designers and engineers are kind of they already kind of rule the world, right? But they are the most capable of becoming the strongest in the product function because they have the other dimension that honestly product managers can't go into, So that's kind of where I see it going.
Cool. Yi-Wei, final thoughts?
I don't want to sound so grim. I don't think it's grim at all, actually. But I want to say something very pragmatic. I think it really depends on how invested we are in the region. I really think that the success of the region will largely depend on how much investment, how much headspace, how much commitment we have to investing in communities like these, right? In communities like these, in mentorship programs is not the right word, but mentorship relationships, in the region, and how committed we are to building the next generation of design leaders and product leaders and engineering leaders. But at the same time, I'm more hopeful than ever before. Why? I looking at the amount of energy and funding and resourcing being poured into product and tech, and having successes, don't forget, having successful companies that scaled out of the region, have exited in the region. Talabat exited quite a few years ago. Kareem is a more recent one. Souk is another recent one. Having exits also builds a lot of momentum in the region. Say, you know what, like you can build a successful tech company here. And when people are contemplating, hey, should I move to the MENA region? They say, oh, actually, there have been very interesting companies that have come out of here. You know, Swivel's the most recent one that has had a massive funding round. Is great for the region. I think it draws some really interesting and exciting people and talent into the region. I think the next piece here is this acquisition and retention, right? I think there's a piece of retention where if we draw the right people in the region who are committed to making this their home, not just on their personal life, but the professional home for the next X number of years, and commit to building this as a community, I think we have a real chance at making this a hub for product and tech.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts?
Yeah,
Yes,
just
Ronnie?
one. I think one of the questions was around what is coming up next in product or technology. I did want to make a pitch for something a little bit different, which is people often ask me, they're like, hey, is it going to be artificial intelligence? Is it machine learning? Is it cryptocurrency? Is it all these different things? Now I work at a company where we fundamentally sell flights and hotels, right? So I get my team come to me all the time stressed out about something. They're like, the world is ending. And I have to remind them, guys, we sell people flights and hotels, like calm down. We're not saving the world, right? So whatever you think is such a big deal, it's not as big as you're making it. Just get present and try and solve the human problem, right? But that's the point I actually want to leave you with, because I believe the future, considering the world that we're living in today, and the news is a pretty grim place, right? When you look at and I think here in Dubai, especially, I think we live in kind of a bubble, right? And we're so insulated from the real problems of the rest of the world, right? Like thinking about places in North America or Asia, or where I originally come from, India, there's a lot of political, socioeconomic, there's a lot of gender equity, there's a lot of just real world problems that I think we don't really experience here. And I really believe this form of thinking, this approach of doing things, it's really going to be, that's the space where we should be going and solving problems. It's again, human problems, right? We think very much in terms of, we hear these great stories of the startups who get exits and it's all bullshit, right? It's a great story that a company made money, but these have just become the new mythological superheroes that used to be the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, and product managers, designers, all this kind of stuff. This has become the new de facto, hey, if I do this role, I'm gonna be the next superhero. My message is this, is if we're solving real world human problems at any level, using this way of working and this way of thinking, that's what's really gonna matter, right? Like that's really what's gonna leave a lasting impact. And any of you will look back and say, I did something that I'm proud of, right? And that's really just the message I would give, is that this doesn't just, it's not about just making money or building a startup that exits. Go make a difference, right?
What a good note to end on.
I know, great note to end on. Thank you so much. Amazing, guys. Thank you, Lean and Hadil and the whole Atolia team. Thank you, Greta, for being amazing behind the scenes. And thanks everyone for coming. Feel free to stay until Lean kicks us out and network and chat. And you can find these guys or myself on LinkedIn. If your question wasn't asked, apologies, but hit us all up and I'm sure we can continue the chat on the socials. Thanks, everyone.